This one is lesson is about using the do and undo method to solve equations. So before we get started with that, let's fill in what the undo as these different operations are. So remember, the undo means what's the opposite of what you see. So you are going to use the pencil tool and you're going to write in here, oops, it looks like I put a little dot, what you think. You know, you can change the color if you want. Just go in here and, I don't know, change it to some whatever color you want. Let's do red, or you can do green, whatever you choose, and then your tool will write that. So what is the opposite of addition? So it's just subtraction, and you can do the best you can with the tool. Opposite of subtraction is addition. The opposite of multiplication is division. And if you want to write the words in, you're more than welcome to. I'm just going to do symbols. Opposite of division is multiplication, and I'm going to use a dot for multiplication because we're dealing with variables and I don't really want to use the x. What is the opposite of a square? That is a square root. So when you take this opposite of a square, you get a square root. Same thing with the square root. The opposite is taking the square of it. So remember, this is the same thing as whatever number it is times itself. So like x times x is what x squared is. Okay, that's an x. And then the opposite of a fraction, if you have a on the top and b on the bottom, the opposite would be b on the top and a on the bottom. All right, so those are just a reminder of what each one is. Now I'm going to move to the next slide because this is where you're going to use this information. You're going to be given a table like this, where it's a do, undo, result. So what we're going to do is the do, we're going to work down this direction, and the undo, we're going to work up this direction to get our results. So let me show you. Mine are way more complicated than the ones that you're going to be doing, but I just want to show you pretty much all the steps that you would need. So think about the do column as what would you do if you put a value in for x? All right, so what's the first step following order of operations? Don't worry about the equal and the 4 over here yet. We're just going to look at the left side. So if I put a value in for x, the first thing I would do is take the square root. Okay? After I take the square root, and I'll fill out the undo in a minute, but right now, after I take the square root, what's the next thing I would do? Well, I still have to work inside my parentheses because remember, we're doing PEMDAS. So if you want to write that over here, you remember, you know, parentheses, exponents, and then multiplication and division. They go hand in hand. And then addition and subtraction. Okay, so PEMDAS. So I'm going to work inside my parentheses, and then I'm going to do the exponent, which is a square root inside. The next thing I would do inside the parentheses would be I would subtract 2. So I'm going to write that, subtract 2. And we're actually going to write the number. With the square root, you're not really going to write the number because it's just x in there. So the square root of whatever that number ends up being is what we're going to do. All right, so now I've gotten rid of this and this. The next thing I would do, I'd have some number in here, so I'm going to cube it. So I'm just going to put an a to the third power. So it just means that I'm going to cube it, whatever it is. And so that just means it'd be a times a times a. So it'd be 3 a's multiplied together. After I get that answer, the next thing I would do is times it by 5. So I'm going to do that, put a dot, times by 5, and then the very last thing I would do is divide, because now I've gotten rid of everything up here. This is all gone, that's some number. The last thing I would do is times it, or divide it, that's what that line means, divide by 10. So I'm going to write that, divide by 10. All right, so now I have my do column. Now I'm going to go over to the undo part. So I'm just going to write the opposite. What's the opposite divided by 10? Well, multiply by 10. So I'm going to put a dot, multiply by 10. What's the opposite of multiplying by 5? Divide by 5. Okay. Opposite of a cube something would be the cubed root. So I'm going to put it looks like a square root, but a little 3 here to mean that I have to take the cubed root of it. I need to find a number that's times in itself by 3. Then the next thing is add 2. So I'm going to add 2, because that's the opposite of subtracting. The last thing is the square root. So the opposite of square root we said is a square. So I'm going to square whatever number I get. All right. Now for the result column. So I just wrote the opposite in the undo column. Now the result. Result is where we're going to, and I'm going to change the color. I'm going to change it to red, I think. Is I'm going to use this 4 here. So the result, that 4, goes in this bottom box here. 4. What it means is that whatever's in the undo column, you are going to do to the result. So I have 4, and I'm timesing it by 10. So I'm going to write it here, 4 times 10. What do I get? Well, 4 times 10 is 40, so I'm going to write that there. All right, now I'm going to change the color again. Hopefully I'll have enough colors for this. I'm going to take whatever my answer is after I did the first operation. So I'm going like this, and then I'm going here. And I get 40, and then I'm going to do the next step. So I'm going to divide by 5. So 40 divided by 5 gives me 8. All right, so I did this with the 5, and then I went here. Okay, so I did that. Now let's change one more time. Let's go to purple. I'm going to take my result from this, and I'm going to do it with the cubed root. So I'm going to do the cubed root of 8. Well, if you're not sure, you can definitely use a calculator. What times what gives you 8? Well, 2 times 2 times 2 gives me 8. So I'm going to write 2. That's the answer. So I took this, went here, and then I went and wrote it here. Okay, so I'm moving up. Now let's change the color again to orange. I have this answer, my result, and I'm going to do the next step. Well, it says to add 2. So I have 2 plus 2, which equals 4. So I went here to there and wrote it there, doing what it says. So there's my answer with that one. So now let's move on. I don't really want to use black, but I think I will anyway, because that's the next color. So here's my black, and it tells me to square it. So I'm going to do 4 to the 2nd power, and I get, well, 4 times 4 is 16. It's not 8, so don't think it's 4 times 2. It's 4 times 4. So I did this, and now I'm here. All right. Now that I have this 16, that is my final answer. So we're going to go back to the blue. 16 is what goes in my result box up here. So in this case, x equals 16. So what that's saying is and I'm going to erase all that stuff I have up there. If I would put 16 in for x, do I get 4? Well, we can try it real quick. We have 5 times, in parentheses, the square root of 16 minus 2, and then I'm going to cube it. Let's see if I can write the 3, and then I got to divide it by 10. Does it equal 4? Okay, so that's what I'm asking myself. Well, the square root of 16 is 4, so I'm going to erase that. And I'm going to put in 4. Okay. Now I have 4 minus 2. Well, 4 minus 2 is 2, so I'm going to erase those. And I'm going to put in 2. Well, 2 to the 3rd power, so 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, so that whole thing is 8. So I'm going to erase this and type in 8. Well, 5 times 8, these are parentheses, 5 times 8 is 40, and I can just write it over here. So that's 40, and it's divided by 10. That does equal 4. 40 divided by 10 does equal 4. So it works, so I did that one right. All right, let's move on to the next one. The reason why I'm showing you these two is because there's 2 square roots in here, and I want you to pay attention. This one, this x was only under the square root, so it only applies to x, not the minus 2. The next one has the plus 2 under the square root, so that's one whole thing. So let's do this one. starting with x, what would I do going down? So if I put a number in for x, the first thing I would do is add 2. So I'm going to write that, add 2. Okay, once again, this one's a little bit harder than what I'm having you do, but just so you can see how it works for all of these. So after I add 2, then I take the square root. So then I'm going to put the square root, because that's the next step I take if I put a number in for x. Once I take the square root, then I would square it. So I'm going to put a squared. After I square it, I multiply it by 4. So times it by 4. And the last step is divide by 36. So divide by 36. All right. Okay, here we go. Now the undo column. What is the opposite of dividing by 36? Multiplying by 36. Okay. What's the opposite of multiplying by 4? Dividing by 4. Okay. Opposite of a squaring a number would be taking the square root. Opposite of the square root of something is squaring it. And the opposite of adding 2 would be subtracting 2. Once again, I'm going to use different colors for things. I'm going to start off with red. And I'm going to take my 1, my result, my answer, and I'm going to put it in this box down here. So I'm going to put 1 there. The step says do it backwards. So we're going to go this way. All right. And actually, I want to maybe write that on the other side so we can kind of see. So we're going to go this way. All right. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is 1 times 36. So 1 times 36. So 1 times 36 equals 36. All right. Change the color again. We'll do it in blue. 36 is my next answer. So my next result, I'm going to do what it says. It says to divide it by 4. So 36 divided by 4 equals 9. All right, next step, change the color, green. 9, I'm doing what it says. I'm going to take the square root of 9. Okay, square root of 9. Remember, this is some number times some number equals this. So, or what's the one length side of a square with the area of 9? It would be 3. All right, next color, purple. The next thing it says to do is take this number and square it. So let's do that. So let's do 3 squared. Well, that just equals 9. We just figured that out. We just did the square root. So 9. Last thing it says is take our result and subtract 2. So I have 9 minus 2. And that looks kind of like an A, but it's a 9. Well, 9 minus 2 is 7. So equals 7. Change to the last color. I'm just going to move this up into this box. So that means x is equal to 7. Now when you do yours, you do not need to put all these little lines here, all these arrows. That is just so you can see what I'm doing. You just need to show me the work on the side and how you got your result. You don't have to prove it, but if you wanted to, take 7 in there, do 7 plus 2 gives you 9. The square root of 9 is 3. 3 squared is 9. 9 times 4 is 36. 36 divided by 36 is 1. But you do not need to prove it to me. You just need to fill in the table. That's what this whole entire thing is all about, is to help you organize it and make sure you don't forget a step to get your result.